Hey everyone. For those of you that have left a Christian church, I'm sure some of you are being told that you should convert to Judaism or become something called a Noahide. If you are, or if you're considering it, please hear me out. Shalom everybody, and welcome to Beit Tefillah. Once leaving the Christian church, or if you've left the Hebrew roots or maybe the Messianic movement, a lot of people will think that they're going to be doing the right thing if they convert to Judaism, or possibly instead become something called a Noahide, because some people have told they should do that if they're not Jewish. Let me just say one thing up front here. Nowhere in the Torah or even in the Tanakh does it say that anyone should ever become a Christian, convert to Judaism, or become something called a Noahide. Let me also say that I'm in no way knocking the Jewish people here, as I have Jewish blood in me from both my mother and my father. I just don't personally agree with everything that they believe. They're not in idolatry like Christians or Messianics, which is a great thing. And while I would never again step foot into a Christian church to be part of any kind of worship service there, I would have no problem at all going into a Jewish synagogue and worshiping with them. I would have no reservations whatsoever. You know, and I get why some people feel like they want to convert to Judaism, is they might have had this big fellowship or extended family with their Christian church, and now that they're missing that, or they want to make sure their children are raised in the Torah or grow up attending the biblical feast now instead of all the pagan holidays like Christianity does. And I get that, and that is a wonderful thing. All I'm saying here is you don't have to convert, as in God doesn't require it. Okay? In other words, if somebody is telling you that you have to convert to a certain group to become one of God's people, no, you don't. And do not, whatever you do not leave Christianity just to become something called a Noahide, no matter what you're told, as you'll be no better off, because you're still going to be out of covenant. Noahides are only allowed to do some of God's commands, and you can research this. You can Google what the 7 Noahide commandments are, but they only get to do some of the commands, being told that they can't do all of them because they're not Jewish. Yet God states in Exodus 12:49, there is one Torah for the native born and for the stranger who sojourns among you. And also in Numbers 15:29, there is one Torah, both for him who is native among the children of Yisra'el and for the stranger who sojourns in their midst. And that should tell you clearly that there are not 2 laws, one for the Jews and one's for everybody else, the Noahides. That's nonsense. And this is per our Creator. So who are you going to listen to? Who are you going to believe? Anyone who takes hold of God's entire covenant may join themselves to Yehovah by becoming Yisra'el, not by converting to Judaism, or especially something as silly as a Noahide. You know, there's a lot to cover on this particular topic, and I've already done so in a video called Beware of the Noahide Laws, so I'm not going to rehash all that in this video. But I'm going to add a link to this video below in the description, and I think anyone who is considering becoming a Noahide, who is a Noahide, should watch that video to find out exactly why you should not. Well, let me switch gears a little bit and say, we would not have the Torah and the rest of the Old Testament as we know it today without it being lovingly preserved over the years by Jewish people. Many of them who sacrificed themselves or faced a lot of danger by holding on to this, and what a wonderful thing. But you know, for a very long time, when it seemed like everybody had turned their face against God's people, only the Jews were keeping the Sabbath. Only the Jews were keeping God's feast days. And that's why a lot of these things over time became known as Jewish. Because you have the 12 tribes that become scattered. 10 northern tribes are still scattered. And the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, they went back home. And they all went under the name Judah because Judah was the largest of them. And that's where you get the term Jew. So that's why Jewish has become kind of a catch-all term today for those that are keeping the Torah and those who are, keeping all the feast days. But it's truly B'nai Yisra'el, or the children of Yisrael, and not just the tribe of Judah, because there was 12 tribes, right? And years ago, I was going to do a video on why the Jews won't have anything to do with the New Testament or its Messiah, but it's a whole lot easier just to sum it up by saying they know the Tanakh so well, they know their Old Testament so well, that they're not falling for it. Okay? They preserved it and they know what it says, and when the New Testament comes around, they're like, no, that is in direct opposition to the Word of God. Now the Torah, it wasn't written down originally. It was passed down generation to generation up until the children of Yisra'el found themselves in captivity in Egypt for 400 years. And I explained this and go into more detail in a video I did some years ago entitled, Was the Torah First Given at Mount Sinai? And I'm going to add a link to that below as well. But anyway, after the children of Yisrael were in captivity for all those years, they'd either forgotten a lot of the Torah, or it was blended with the Egyptian sun god worship, with a lot of their idolatry, the same way Christianity is today. So God had to use Moses to lead them out of Egypt into the desert, and he had to have Moses write down the commandments and give it to him on Mount Sinai and say, there you go, now don't add to it and don't subtract from it. And there weren't copies of this in everybody's tents. You know, like everyone has Bibles with the Torah in them in their homes today. So the Torah was commanded to be read out loud to the people every 7 years in the Shemitah, and this might be the only time that people got to hear much of the Torah, or any of it, is when it was read out loud to them during the Shemitah. But God said, don't add to it and don't subtract from it. This is what you're going to do if you want to be my people. So I don't give much credibility to something called an oral Torah. What would the point be of God giving his Torah, of God giving his word, and say, there, now don't add to it, don't subtract from it, it's all written down, just keep it, and you have it, and then give them an oral Torah that could have been changed? I mean, what's the point of doing this to just do this? That doesn't make sense. That's not something God would do. But the oral Torah isn't the Torah. It's the Talmud, and it's simply a collection of Jewish and rabbinical writings on how they interpret the Torah, which sometimes add or subtracts from it, which is strictly forbidden by Elohim. And in the Talmud is where you're going to find all this Noahide law nonsense. Isaiah 56:6. Also the sons of the stranger that join themselves to Yehovah to serve him and to love the name of Yehovah, to be his servants, and everyone that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it and takes hold of my covenant. So we have just one covenant, the same for everyone throughout time. That's it, and it makes it much simpler. What God did is he gave us the freedom to choose, and that's such a great gift. But there's only one way to become his people. That's by accepting the terms of his covenant in the Torah. He says, you can do anything you want, but if you want to be my people, this is how you're going to live. In other words, become one of his people by keeping his covenant in the Torah, and you've already converted. Simple. Okay? Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Please sub to our channel if you haven't done so yet, and give us a thumbs up because we'd sure appreciate it. And a shout out and a shalom to all who are Yisra'el and are scattered worldwide in the dispersion. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.